Before we begin, hit like. Your thumb has survived countless hours of scrolling. Let's see if it can survive one click for once. You walk into a room. Everyone sees the people. You notice the silence. Everyone hears the words. You notice the hesitation before them. Everyone laughs at the joke. You notice the person who laughed a little too loudly. And sometimes, you wish you didn't notice so much. Because once you start seeing beneath the surface, you can't easily go back. They expected you to react to what was obvious. But you started questioning what was underneath. They thought you were quiet because you had nothing to say. But you were quiet because you were processing everything. The tone, the timing, the contradiction, the expression that disappeared half a second too quickly. And that's when everything changed. You realized something uncomfortable. Most people don't experience reality exactly as it is. They experience their interpretation of it. And deep thinkers often spend more time questioning that interpretation than accepting it. But here's the strange part. Seeing more doesn't always make life easier. Sometimes it makes life heavier. Because when you begin noticing patterns other people overlook, you also begin noticing things you wish you could ignore. And that's where the psychology of the deep thinker becomes fascinating. Because deep thinking isn't simply being intelligent. It's not knowing complicated words. It's not sitting alone dramatically beside a window while staring into the rain. Although, let's be honest, that does look suspiciously philosophical. Deep thinking is the tendency to move beneath the obvious. To ask one more question. Then another. Then another. Until the surface explanation isn't enough anymore. You don't just ask what happened. You ask why it happened. You don't just ask what someone said. You ask what they meant. You don't just examine another person's behavior. Eventually, you turn that same examination toward yourself. And that is where deep thinking becomes both a gift and a burden. Because the mind that can uncover hidden patterns can also manufacture patterns that aren't there. The mind that can detect contradictions can become obsessed with them. The mind that can understand human behavior can spend hours analyzing a conversation that lasted 30 seconds. And if you don't learn to control that mind, your greatest strength can quietly become your greatest weakness. But that's only the beginning. The first thing deep thinkers often see differently is inconsistency. You hear someone's words, but you also notice whether their behavior agrees with those words. Someone tells you they're not angry, but their voice changes. Someone says they don't care, but they keep checking whether you noticed them. Someone says everything is fine, but something about the atmosphere tells you it isn't. Now, does that mean your interpretation is always correct? No, and this distinction matters. Deep thinking without humility can become paranoia. Observation without verification can become assumption. Your brain is constantly trying to create a coherent story from incomplete information. That's normal human psychology. When information is missing, the mind fills gaps. Sometimes it fills them accurately. Sometimes it doesn't. The mature deep thinker learns to hold both possibilities. I noticed something. That's observation. I know exactly what it means. That's interpretation. Those are not the same thing. And that distinction can save you from countless unnecessary conflicts. Because one of the most powerful forms of self-control is the ability to observe something without immediately reacting to your interpretation of it. Epictetus built much of his philosophy around this separation. An event happens. Then your judgment about the event appears. And between those two things lies your opportunity for freedom. Someone ignores your message. That's an event. They don't respect me. That's an interpretation. They're trying to hurt me. Another interpretation. They've lost interest. Another possibility. But you don't actually know yet. The deep thinker who understands Stoicism learns to sit inside uncertainty without desperately filling it with a story. And that is a rare form of power. Because uncertainty makes the ego uncomfortable. The ego wants answers. Immediately. It wants certainty. It wants control. It wants to know who is right, who is wrong, who cares, who doesn't care, who stayed, who left, who won. But reality doesn't always cooperate. Sometimes you simply don't know. And the ability to say, I don't know yet, is not weakness. It is intellectual discipline. Here's what they didn't expect. They expected your mind to chase every unanswered question. Instead, you learned which questions deserved your attention. And that distinction changes everything. Because not every mystery deserves to be solved. Not every silence requires interpretation. Not every person's behavior requires analysis. Not every unanswered message deserves a courtroom trial inside your head. Sometimes silence is simply silence. Sometimes people are distracted. Sometimes people are confused. Sometimes people don't know what they want. And sometimes, yes, their behavior tells you something important. Your job isn't to assume the worst. Your job is to observe clearly enough that you don't need to assume anything. That's the first discipline of the deep thinker. See without immediately judging. And once you learn that, something else begins to happen. You start noticing how much of human behavior is driven by the need for validation. People don't only want to be understood. They want to be confirmed. They want their identity reflected back at them. Tell someone they're attractive. They may enjoy it. Tell them they're intelligent. They may remember it. Tell them they're important. Now you've touched something deeper. Because identity is one of the most protected territories in the human mind. And deep thinkers often become fascinated by this. Why does one criticism stay in your head for 3 years while 10 compliments disappear by bedtime? Why can one person's rejection make you question your entire worth? Why does being ignored sometimes hurt more than being insulted? Because attention isn't merely attention. To the human mind, attention can become evidence. If they chose me, I must matter. If they rejected me, maybe I wasn't enough. If everyone approves of me, I must be doing something right. And suddenly your emotional stability has been outsourced to other people. That is where deep thinking becomes useful. Because once you understand the mechanism, you can question it. You can ask, why does this person's opinion have so much authority over my identity? And that question can be uncomfortable. Because sometimes the person you're trying desperately to impress hasn't even thought about you for 5 minutes. You're fighting a psychological battle in which the other person isn't even participating. If that hit a little too close to home, comment, I choose clarity. Don't worry, the algorithm won't tell your overthinking brain. But there's something deeper happening. Deep thinkers often become aware of their own emotional machinery. They notice when they're seeking validation. They notice when they're becoming attached. They notice when they are replaying an interaction because their ego didn't get the answer it wanted. And awareness creates a strange problem. Once you become aware of your patterns, you can no longer comfortably pretend they aren't there. You see yourself, not the version of yourself you show everyone else. The actual version, the insecure version, the jealous version, the needy version, the ambitious version, the frightened version, the part of you that wants to appear completely unaffected while secretly checking whether someone noticed you disappeared. And this is where many people stop. They want to understand other people, but they don't want to understand themselves. Because analyzing someone else feels powerful. Analyzing yourself requires honesty. And honesty can hurt. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly returned to the importance of examining your own mind rather than being controlled by external events. The Stoic question isn't simply, what are they doing? It is, what is happening inside me right now? That question shifts the center of gravity back to you. Someone disrespects you. You notice anger. Someone rejects you. You notice insecurity. Someone succeeds. You notice envy. Someone ignores you. You notice the desire to chase. You don't have to condemn yourself for having these reactions. You simply have to see them. Because you cannot master what you refuse to observe. And this leads to one of the strangest traits of deep thinkers. They often need solitude, not because they hate humanity, not because they're superior, not because they're secretly plotting their villain origin story. They need solitude because constant stimulation makes reflection difficult. When every moment is filled with notifications, conversations, videos, opinions, arguments, entertainment, and noise, you rarely hear your own thoughts. Solitude removes the noise, and when the noise disappears, something uncomfortable appears. You, your thoughts, your memories, your unresolved questions, your ambitions, your fears, your regrets. your contradictions. That is why solitude can be frightening. It doesn't necessarily create your problems. It reveals them. And many people avoid being alone for exactly that reason. They don't fear silence. They fear what silence might show them. But the deep thinker eventually learns to sit with that discomfort. They discover that solitude can become a laboratory for the mind. You begin asking, what do I actually want? Which parts of my personality are genuine? Which parts did I develop to be accepted? Why am I chasing this? Who would I become if nobody were watching? Those questions can change your life. Because eventually you realize that some of your goals were never truly yours. You inherited them. From family, from culture, from social media, from comparison, from people you wanted to impress. You thought you wanted status. Maybe you wanted respect. You thought you wanted money. Maybe you wanted freedom. You thought you wanted a certain person. Maybe you wanted validation. And deep thinking allows you to separate the surface desire from the psychological need underneath it. That is an enormous advantage. But again, there's a darker side. The deeper you think, the easier it can become to overthink. And overthinking disguises itself as intelligence. That's what makes it dangerous. You tell yourself you're analyzing. But sometimes you're avoiding action. You tell yourself you're preparing. But sometimes you're afraid to begin. You tell yourself you're considering every possibility. But sometimes you're terrified of choosing. The mind can create an endless hallway of possibilities. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if I fail? What if they judge me? What if I choose the wrong path? And suddenly you have spent 3 hours thinking about a decision that required 3 minutes. This is where Stoicism draws a hard line. You can think deeply, but eventually, you must act. Seneca warned against wasting life through endless postponement. The point isn't to eliminate thought. The point is to make thought serve action. A sword can be examined forever. Eventually, it must be used. Your mind is the same. Reflection should sharpen you. It shouldn't paralyze you. So ask yourself, is this thought helping me understand something? Or, am I simply repeating the same fear in different sentences? That question alone can expose an enormous amount of overthinking. Because productive reflection eventually produces a decision. Rumination produces another loop, and another, until exhaustion feels like progress. It isn't. You don't need to think about something 10,000 times to prove that it matters. Sometimes you need one clear thought, then one courageous action, and this is where deep thinkers begin to transform. They stop trying to understand everything. They start understanding what matters. They stop treating every emotion as an instruction. They stop treating every thought as truth. They stop treating every person's behavior as a referendum on their worth. They begin separating reality from interpretation, emotion from action, attention from attachment, solitude from loneliness, and knowledge from wisdom. Because knowledge tells you what you know. Wisdom teaches you what not to do with what you know. That distinction separates the intelligent mind from the disciplined mind. Anyone can become fascinated by psychology. The deeper challenge is applying it when your ego is wounded. It's easy to understand emotional detachment when you're calm. Try it when someone you desperately want walks away. It's easy to talk about self-respect when nobody is challenging you. Try maintaining it when you're terrified of losing someone. It's easy to say you don't need validation. Try saying that when the person whose approval matters most suddenly withdraws it. That's the real test, not what you understand, what you can remain when life presses against your understanding. And this is why the deepest thinkers eventually become students of themselves. They don't merely ask, how does the world work? They ask, how does my mind work when the world doesn't behave the way I want? That question leads somewhere powerful. Because you discover that your greatest battles aren't always against other people. Sometimes they're against your own interpretations, your own impulses, your own need to be understood, your own need to win, your own desire to be chosen, your own fear of being forgotten. And once you see that, something begins to loosen. You stop needing every person to understand you. You stop needing every argument to end with you being right. You stop needing every relationship to last forever. You stop needing rejection to become revenge. And you stop measuring your value by who stays. That's not indifference. That's emotional sovereignty. But there's another trait deep thinkers often develop. They become comfortable with complexity. They understand that people can be both kind and selfish, strong and insecure, loving and afraid, honest in one moment and dishonest in another. A person can care about you and still be incapable of giving you what you need. Someone can have good intentions and still cause harm. Someone can love you and still be wrong for your life. This is uncomfortable because the human mind loves simple categories. Good person, bad person, friend, enemy, success, failure, love, hate. But human beings are rarely that simple. And deep thinkers often become less interested in labeling people and more interested in understanding patterns. They don't need to turn someone into a villain to justify walking away. They don't need to prove someone is evil to establish a boundary. They can say, this person may not be terrible, but this relationship may still be unhealthy for me. That is maturity, and it is also Stoic. Because your responsibility isn't to control another person's character. Your responsibility is to govern your own. You cannot force someone to respect you. You can control what access they have to you. You cannot force someone to communicate honestly. You can control whether you continue participating in confusion. You cannot control whether someone chooses you. You can control whether you abandon yourself trying to be chosen. And that is one of the deepest transformations a thinker can experience. At first, you use your mind to understand other people. Eventually, you use it to understand yourself. Then you use that understanding to govern yourself. And finally, you stop needing to govern everyone else. That is freedom. But here's what they didn't tell you about seeing what others miss. Sometimes you will see something and still be unable to change it. You may recognize that a relationship is unhealthy. You may recognize that a habit is destroying your discipline. You may recognize that you're wasting time. You may recognize that someone isn't giving you what you need. Awareness doesn't automatically produce courage. Knowing the truth and accepting the truth are different things. And accepting the truth can be one of the hardest psychological acts a human being performs. Because sometimes the truth doesn't give you what you wanted. Sometimes it gives you a door. And the door says, leave, let go, change, grow, stop, begin again. And your ego whispers, maybe tomorrow. That's how years disappear, not through one catastrophic decision. Through thousands of tiny postponements. I'll change later. I'll leave later. I'll start later. I'll become disciplined later. I'll stop caring later. But later is not a strategy. And deep thinking becomes valuable only when it produces movement. So if you recognize yourself in this, don't romanticize being a deep thinker. Don't turn overthinking into an identity. Don't wear exhaustion like a badge of intelligence. Don't tell yourself you're different simply because your mind is loud. The goal isn't to think more than everyone else. The goal is to think clearly enough that you can live differently. Because the deepest thinker isn't necessarily the person with the most thoughts. It's the person who knows which thoughts deserve to survive. If you're still watching, congratulations. Your attention span just survived the internet. Now use it wisely. Because we're not finished. The most important trait of deep thinkers hasn't appeared yet. It's the ability to notice what happens inside themselves when they are losing control. That is where the real battle begins. And that is where thinking becomes self-mastery. Because imagine someone insults you. The ordinary reaction is immediate. Anger, defense, counterattack. The ego wants to restore status. It wants the other person to feel what you felt. But the trained mind creates a pause. A microscopic space between stimulus and response. And inside that space is choice. You can ask, what exactly was threatened? My dignity, my image, my ego, or simply my expectation? That question can dismantle anger before anger becomes behavior. The Stoics understood something remarkably modern. You don't control every event. You don't control every person's opinion. You don't control whether people misunderstand you. But you have influence over your judgment, your response, and your character. That isn't passive, it's disciplined. It's the difference between being emotionally controlled by the world and remaining internally anchored while the world behaves unpredictably. And once you develop that ability, people may notice something strange. You become quieter, not weaker, quieter. You don't explain yourself endlessly. You don't chase every misunderstanding. You don't respond to every provocation. You don't need to announce every boundary. Your behavior begins speaking before your words do. And that's when deep thinking becomes something more than introspection. It becomes presence. You walk into a room without needing to dominate it. You listen without planning your next sentence. You observe without constantly seeking approval. You can enjoy attention without becoming addicted to it. You can receive criticism without collapsing. You can receive praise without becoming dependent on it. You can love someone without making them responsible for your identity. You can lose someone without losing yourself. That is the destination. Not becoming emotionless. Not becoming cold. Not becoming some detached character who pretends nothing matters. That's not strength. That's often avoidance wearing expensive philosophical clothing. Real strength is being capable of feeling deeply without allowing every feeling to dictate your behavior. You can care without clinging. You can love without possessing. You can forgive without reopening the door. You can walk away without hatred. You can remember without returning. And you can understand someone without excusing everything they do. That is emotional maturity. And perhaps that is the hidden gift of deep thinking. It teaches you that the world is more complicated than your first impression. But it also teaches you that your own mind is more complicated than you thought. You are not every thought that enters your head. You are not every emotion that passes through your body. You are not every rejection you've experienced. You are not every mistake you've made. You are not the opinion of someone who couldn't see your value. And you are certainly not the worst thing you've ever done. You are the person capable of observing all of it, learning from it, and choosing what happens next. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to return repeatedly to the task in front of him. Not tomorrow, not someday, now. That is another lesson deep thinkers desperately need. A mind that constantly travels through the past and future can forget the only place where action is possible. The present. You can analyze yesterday forever. It will not change. You can worry about next year forever. It hasn't happened. But right now, you can choose. One decision, one habit, one boundary, one conversation, 1 hour of focused work, one moment of restraint, one refusal to chase what doesn't choose you, one decision to stop betraying yourself for temporary validation. That's where transformation becomes real. Not inside your thoughts, inside your behavior, because eventually, you have to leave the laboratory of your mind and enter life. Think deeply, then live deliberately. Observe people, but don't obsess over them. Understand psychology, but don't use it to manipulate. Recognize patterns, but don't assume you know everything. Protect your peace, but don't build walls around your humanity. Value yourself, but don't turn self-respect into arrogance. And perhaps most importantly, never become so fascinated by understanding people that you forget to understand yourself. Because the person you will spend your entire life with is you. Not your ex, not your friends, not your critics, not your followers, not the person who rejected you. You. So learn your patterns. Learn what triggers you. Learn what makes you desperate for validation. Learn what makes you angry. Learn what makes you abandon your standards. Learn what makes you procrastinate. Learn what makes you chase. And then learn to interrupt those patterns. That is where the philosophy becomes practical. That's where Stoicism stops being something you quote and becomes something you embody. The ultimate goal isn't to become someone who sees everything. It's to become someone who sees clearly. Because seeing everything without wisdom can destroy your peace. Seeing clearly gives you direction. And maybe that's why deep thinkers sometimes feel misunderstood. They're not necessarily trying to be mysterious. They're simply processing more layers of the situation. But don't make the mistake of believing that being misunderstood makes you superior. It doesn't. Sometimes people misunderstand you. Sometimes you misunderstand them. Sometimes everyone is simply human. The wise person leaves room for that possibility. Because humility is the final protection against intelligence becoming arrogance. You may see something others miss. But you can still miss something others see. You may understand psychology. But you can still misunderstand a person. You may be highly self-aware. But still have blind spots. And that should make you curious, not insecure. Because the strongest mind isn't closed. It's flexible. It can say, I was wrong. I don't know. I need to learn. I reacted emotionally. I misunderstood. I can do better. Those aren't statements of weakness. They're signs that your identity isn't so fragile that it must defend every mistake. And that is a rare kind of freedom. You no longer need to be perfect. You need to be honest. You no longer need everyone to approve of you. You need to respect yourself. You no longer need to predict every outcome. You need to respond well when outcomes change. You no longer need to understand every mystery. You need to know which mysteries deserve your attention. And perhaps that's the deepest thing a thinker can learn. Life will always contain things you cannot explain. People will always behave in ways you don't understand. Some relationships will end without satisfying closure. Some questions will never receive perfect answers. Some people will leave without explaining why. And eventually, you discover that peace does not come from understanding everything. It comes from accepting that you don't have to. You can let the unanswered question remain unanswered. You can let the person remain misunderstood. You can let the past remain unfinished. You can walk forward without every chapter receiving a perfect ending. Because sometimes closure isn't something someone gives you. Sometimes closure is the decision to stop asking the past for permission to live. And that's when everything changes. The deep thinker who once analyzed every silence learns to listen to his own values. The person who once searched constantly for hidden meanings learns to accept simple truths. The person who once needed to understand everyone learns to govern himself. The person who once feared being misunderstood realizes that self-respect doesn't require universal agreement. And the person who once thought seeing more was a curse discovers that it was never about seeing more. It was about seeing clearly. They expected you to keep chasing answers. They thought uncertainty would control you. They thought rejection would break you. They thought your sensitivity would make you weak. But you learned something different. You learned to observe without obsession. To feel without surrendering. To think without drowning. To love without losing yourself. To walk away without hatred. And to remain calm without becoming cold. That is what happens when a deep mind becomes a disciplined mind. You don't become less human. You become harder to control. Not because you manipulate others. Because you finally stop being manipulated by your own unchecked thoughts. And that may be the greatest form of psychological freedom. The world doesn't become quieter. You become quieter inside it. People don't suddenly become easier to understand. You simply stop needing them to be. Life doesn't become perfectly predictable. You become capable of facing uncertainty. And the things you once noticed as a burden become instruments of wisdom. The silence, the patterns, the contradictions, the solitude, the unanswered questions, even your own darkness. You learn to look at all of it without flinching. And perhaps that is what deep thinkers were searching for all along. Not more information, not more answers, not more people who understand them, but mastery over the mind that keeps asking. Because the deepest mind isn't the one that thinks endlessly. It's the one that eventually knows when thinking is over. And living must begin. So the next time you notice something nobody else seems to notice, don't rush to prove that you're right. Observe, question, verify, then choose your response. And when your mind starts dragging you into another endless loop of what ifs, remember. A thought can knock on your door without being invited inside. You don't have to answer every thought. You don't have to believe every fear. You don't have to chase every mystery. And you don't have to explain yourself to everyone. Sometimes the most powerful thing a deep thinker can do is stop thinking about the thing that no longer deserves his peace. That is not ignorance. That is mastery. And if this video made you recognize a part of yourself you hadn't noticed before, subscribe to Sovereign Mindset. Because the goal isn't to become someone who understands everyone. It's to become someone who cannot be easily controlled by his own mind. See deeply. Think clearly. Live deliberately. Because when you master the mind that observes the world, you finally become sovereign over the person observing it. And that is where thinking becomes self-mastery. Because the deepest transformation doesn't happen when you discover that you think differently. It happens when you discover that your mind can deceive you too. That's the part nobody likes to talk about. A deep thinker can become so confident in their ability to notice patterns that they eventually start seeing patterns everywhere. And this is where intelligence can quietly turn against itself. You notice a change in someone's tone. Then your mind creates a theory. The theory creates another theory. And suddenly you're no longer observing reality. You're observing a story your mind created about reality. That's the trap. Your brain is a prediction machine. It constantly takes fragments of information and tries to build a complete picture. A look, a pause, a delayed response, a different choice of words, a change in routine. Your mind connects them. Sometimes those connections are useful. Sometimes they're completely wrong. And the frightening part is that the wrong interpretation can feel just as convincing as the right one. That's why deep thinkers need something even more important than intelligence. Intellectual humility. The ability to say, I noticed something, but I could be wrong. That sentence sounds simple. It isn't. Because the ego hates uncertainty. The ego would rather have a painful answer than no answer at all. It would rather believe, they don't respect me, than sit with, I don't know why they behaved that way. It would rather believe, I'm going to fail, than tolerate the uncertainty of trying. It would rather believe, they never cared about me, than accept that relationships can be complicated, imperfect, and impossible to completely understand. So your mind gives you certainty. Not necessarily truth, certainty. And deep thinkers must learn to tell the difference. Because sometimes the most dangerous thought isn't a negative thought. It's an unquestioned thought. You can destroy your peace with a conclusion you never verified. You can end a relationship based on an assumption. You can abandon an opportunity because you predicted failure. You can convince yourself that someone hates you because they looked at you differently once. And once the mind believes its own story, it starts collecting evidence. That's confirmation bias. You notice everything that supports the story. You ignore everything that challenges it. Now your mind isn't investigating. It's prosecuting. And you're both the detective and the defendant. This is why the mature thinker doesn't ask only, does this explanation make sense? They ask, what evidence would prove me wrong? That question is powerful, because it forces the ego to leave the courtroom. It forces you to consider another possibility. And sometimes another possibility is all you need to regain your peace. Maybe they weren't rejecting you. Maybe they were struggling with something you know nothing about. Maybe you didn't fail because you're incapable. Maybe you simply haven't developed the skill yet. Maybe that relationship didn't end because you weren't valuable. Maybe two people simply became incompatible. Maybe your life isn't behind. Maybe you're comparing your private reality to someone else's public presentation. And that last one matters more than most people realize. Deep thinkers often compare themselves differently. They don't just compare possessions. They compare trajectories. They look at someone else's success and immediately begin asking, how far ahead are they? What did they figure out that I haven't? Why am I not there yet? What does their progress say about me? And comparison turns observation into self-judgment. You can watch someone succeed and learn from them. Or you can watch someone succeed and use their success as evidence against yourself. The event is identical. Your interpretation changes everything. This is where Stoicism becomes brutally practical. Someone else's progress is outside your control. Your response isn't. You can study them. You can learn from them. You can admire them. You can compete with your previous self. But you cannot control their timing. And you cannot build a peaceful life while constantly measuring yourself against people whose entire story you don't know. Because you're comparing your behind-the-scenes footage to their highlight reel. And social media has turned this into a psychological epidemic. You see the car. You don't see the debt. You see the body. You don't see the years of training. You see the relationship. You don't see the private arguments. You see the business. You don't see the failures. You see the destination. You don't see the road. And the deep thinker who doesn't control comparison can become trapped in endless analysis. Why them? Why not me? When will it be my turn? Those questions feel profound. Sometimes they're just distractions. The better question is, what can I do today? That's it. Bring the mind back. Again. And again. And again. Because self-mastery isn't one dramatic moment. It's the repeated act of returning your attention to what matters. You lose focus. Return. You become emotional. Return. You compare yourself. Return. You start chasing validation. Return. You overthink the past. Return. You worry about the future. Return. The Stoics weren't promising a mind that never wandered. They were pointing toward a mind that could be brought back. And that's a completely different goal. You don't need perfect mental control. You need recovery. You need to catch yourself. That's the skill. Because you will overthink. You will become jealous. You will seek approval. You will react emotionally. You will occasionally misread people. You will make decisions you regret. The question isn't whether those moments happen. The question is how long you stay there. A weak pattern can become a permanent identity if you keep feeding it. But the moment you recognize it, you have an opportunity. You can interrupt it. And here's another thing deep thinkers eventually discover. Their sensitivity can become a form of strength. Not because sensitivity automatically makes you wiser. It doesn't. But sensitivity can make you more aware. You may notice emotional shifts quickly. You may recognize when something feels wrong. You may understand how words affect people. You may notice tension before it becomes conflict. You may pick up on details other people overlook. But sensitivity without boundaries becomes emotional exhaustion. You absorb everything. Someone is unhappy. You assume it's your responsibility. Someone is distant. You immediately question yourself. Someone is angry. You feel compelled to fix it. Someone doesn't understand you. You spend hours trying to explain yourself. And eventually you become exhausted from managing emotions that were never yours. This is where boundaries become essential. You can understand someone without carrying them. You can empathize without becoming responsible for their emotional state. You can care without rescuing. You can listen without absorbing. You can love someone and still say, no. That word may be one of the most powerful words a deep thinker can learn. Because deep thinkers sometimes understand too many perspectives. They can see why someone behaved badly. They can understand someone's childhood. They can understand their fears. They can understand their insecurities. They can understand the reasons behind their behavior. And then they make a dangerous mistake. They confuse understanding with permission. But explanation isn't justification. You can understand why someone hurt you and still refuse to accept being hurt again. You can understand why someone lied and still decide you don't trust them. You can understand someone's pain and still maintain your boundary. Compassion doesn't require self-abandonment. That's a lesson worth remembering. Because there is a difference between being kind and being available for mistreatment. And sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do for yourself is leave. Not dramatically. Not with revenge. Not with a speech designed to make them regret losing you. Simply leave. Quietly. Because you finally understand something. Peace doesn't always come from getting the final word. Sometimes it comes from no longer needing one. That is emotional detachment. Not apathy. Not cruelty. Not pretending you never cared. Detachment means caring without surrendering your identity. It means saying, I want this, but I can survive without it. I love this person, but I will not destroy myself to keep them. I would prefer this outcome, but I will accept reality if it doesn't happen. That is strength, and it changes relationships completely. Because desperation changes the way you behave. When you desperately need someone to stay, you tolerate things you normally wouldn't. You negotiate against yourself. You lower standards. You ignore red flags. You become afraid to speak honestly. You turn love into a survival strategy. But when you know you can survive someone's absence, you become capable of loving them freely. You don't need to control them. You don't need to monitor them. You don't need to manipulate them. You don't need to make them afraid of losing you. You simply choose them while they're choosing you. And if the choice changes, you accept reality. That doesn't mean it won't hurt. It will. Deep thinkers often feel deeply. But pain isn't proof that you made the wrong decision. Sometimes pain is simply the price of accepting reality. And this is where another psychological illusion collapses. We often think closure will make us move on. But sometimes moving on creates closure. You wait for an explanation. They never give one. You wait for an apology. It never comes. You wait for them to admit what they did. They don't. You wait for the perfect conversation that will finally make everything make sense. It never happens. And eventually you face the truth. You may never receive the explanation you wanted. So what now? You have two choices. Keep standing outside a closed door demanding an answer. Or walk away. The second choice is painful. But it is freedom. Because your life cannot remain suspended until someone else gives you permission to continue. And this applies far beyond relationships. Your career may not develop on your preferred timeline. Your dreams may take longer than expected. Your efforts may not immediately produce results. People may not recognize your potential. You may work hard and still lose. And if your identity depends on immediate results, every setback becomes an existential crisis. But if your identity is built around character, setbacks become information. You failed. What did it teach you? You were rejected. What did it reveal? You made a mistake. What can you correct? You lost. What can you rebuild? That mindset is incredibly difficult to destroy. Because you stop asking life to guarantee your success. You ask yourself to remain capable regardless of the outcome. That is Stoic resilience. Not believing everything will work out. Knowing you'll work with whatever happens. And that distinction changes how you approach risk. The deep thinker who is afraid of uncertainty can spend their entire life preparing to live. They research. They plan. They analyze. They wait. They refine. They wait some more. Meanwhile, someone less knowledgeable starts. They make mistakes. They learn. They adapt. And 3 years later, the person who knew less has more experience. Why? Because action creates information that thought cannot. You cannot think your way into every answer. Some answers only appear after movement. You don't know whether the business will work until you test it. You don't know whether the skill can be learned until you practice. You don't know whether the conversation will go well until you have it. You don't know whether the opportunity is right until you step toward it. And this is the final evolution of the deep thinker. You stop using thought as a hiding place. You use it as a weapon for clarity. You think, then act, observe, then adjust, fail, then learn, repeat. That's discipline. And discipline is what turns insight into identity. Because there are countless people who know what they should do. They just don't do it. They know they should exercise. They don't. They know they should study. They don't. They know they should stop chasing someone. They don't. They know they should sleep earlier. They don't. They know they should start the project. They don't. Knowledge isn't the missing ingredient. Execution is. So don't become addicted to consuming wisdom. At some point, wisdom has to become behavior. Read the philosophy. Then put the phone down. Understand the psychology. Then control your reaction. Learn about discipline. Then do the difficult thing. Study human nature. Then stop using that knowledge to manipulate people. Use it to protect your judgment. Use it to recognize patterns. Use it to become harder to deceive. Use it to become harder to provoke. Use it to become harder to control. And most importantly, use it to become easier to govern. Because self-mastery isn't about controlling the world. It's about becoming the kind of person who doesn't need the world to cooperate before they can remain steady. People will misunderstand you. Remain steady. People will criticize you. Remain steady. People will praise you. Remain steady. You will win. Remain steady. You will lose. Remain steady. Someone will choose you. Be grateful. Someone will leave. Accept reality. Your circumstances will change. Your principles shouldn't have to. That's the difference between identity and mood. Mood changes. Character is built. And deep thinkers have one extraordinary advantage if they use it correctly. They can observe themselves while they are becoming themselves. They can catch patterns early. They can question beliefs. They can examine motives. They can deliberately redesign habits. They can choose what kind of person they want to become. But only if they stop worshiping their thoughts. Your mind is a tool, not a god. It can produce brilliant insights. It can also produce nonsense with incredible confidence. So challenge it, question it, train it, and occasionally tell it to be quiet. Because sometimes you don't need another explanation. You need to live, go outside, build something, train, work, create, talk to someone, take the risk, make the decision, close the chapter, begin the next one. The mind needs experience just as much as it needs reflection. Otherwise you become a spectator of your own life. And that would be the greatest tragedy for a deep thinker. To understand life beautifully, and never actually live it. So perhaps the real question isn't, why do deep thinkers see what others miss? Perhaps the deeper question is, what do you do with what you see? Because seeing someone's insecurity doesn't give you permission to exploit it. Seeing someone's weakness doesn't make you powerful. Seeing a hidden pattern doesn't make you superior. Understanding human psychology isn't the destination. Character is. If your knowledge makes you arrogant, it has failed you. If your awareness makes you paranoid, it has failed you. If your intelligence makes you afraid to act, it has failed you. If your sensitivity makes you abandon yourself, it has failed you. But if your awareness makes you disciplined, if your understanding makes you compassionate, if your observation makes you patient, if your reflection makes you courageous, then your mind is finally serving you. And that is the transformation. You stop asking, how can I understand everyone? You start asking, how can I understand myself well enough that I don't betray myself? You stop asking, how can I make them regret losing me? You start asking, why would I need their regret? You stop asking, how can I control what they think? You start asking, can I control how I live? You stop asking, why didn't they choose me? You start asking, did I choose myself? That last question can change everything. Because self-respect isn't a feeling. It's a pattern of decisions. Every time you refuse to betray your values for approval, you strengthen it. Every time you walk away from what repeatedly destroys your peace, you strengthen it. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you strengthen it. Every time you do what needs to be done despite not feeling like doing it, you strengthen it. Every time you choose long-term dignity over short-term validation, you strengthen it. That's how identity is built. Not through declarations, through evidence. You tell yourself you're disciplined. Then prove it. You tell yourself you value yourself. Then prove it. You tell yourself you are capable of handling rejection. Then prove it. You tell yourself you're building a different life. Then prove it, not to the world, to yourself. Because eventually, you stop needing external evidence. You know who you are because you've watched yourself behave accordingly. And that confidence is different. It's quiet. It doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need a caption. It doesn't need someone to be jealous. It doesn't need someone to regret losing you. It doesn't need applause. It simply exists. And perhaps that's why the deepest thinkers can become some of the calmest people in the room. They've already had the argument inside their own mind. They've already questioned the assumption. They've already considered the alternative. They don't need to react instantly. They can pause. And sometimes that pause is everything. Because between what happens and what you do next is a small space. Protect that space. Your anger wants to fill it. Your fear wants to fill it. Your ego wants to fill it. Your insecurity wants to fill it. But you can choose. That's the sovereign mind, not a mind without emotions. A mind that can feel an emotion without surrendering command. Not a mind without fear. A mind that can move despite fear. Not a mind without uncertainty. A mind that can remain steady inside uncertainty. Not a mind that never gets hurt. A mind that doesn't turn every wound into an identity. And not a mind that understands everything. A mind humble enough to know that it never will. That is where deep thinking becomes wisdom. And wisdom is not knowing more. Sometimes wisdom is knowing when enough is enough. enough analysis, enough chasing, enough comparison, enough explaining, enough proving, enough waiting, enough abandoning yourself, enough living inside the opinions of people who don't have to live your life. There comes a moment when you close the mental courtroom. You stop presenting evidence. You stop defending your worth. You stop asking everyone to understand. And you simply begin living according to what you know to be right. That moment may not look dramatic from the outside. Nobody applauds. Nobody notices. Nobody posts about it. But internally, something changes. You become less reactive, more deliberate, less desperate, more grounded, less interested in appearances, more interested in character. And suddenly, the things that once controlled you begin losing their power. The unanswered message, the criticism, the rejection, the comparison, the uncertainty, the silence, they may still hurt, but they no longer own you. That's the difference. Freedom isn't reaching a point where nothing affects you. Freedom is reaching a point where nothing outside your control gets to decide who you become. So yes, deep thinkers may see what others miss. They may notice patterns. They may question assumptions. They may crave solitude. They may analyze conversations. They may wrestle with uncertainty. They may feel deeply. But those aren't trophies. They're responsibilities. If you see more, you have to learn to judge less. If you understand more, you have to learn to control yourself more. If you notice weakness, you must resist the temptation to exploit it. If you can read people, you must become better at reading yourself. And if you can see beneath the surface, you must be brave enough to look beneath your own. Because the final mystery isn't other people, it's you. The person beneath the habits, beneath the ego, beneath the image, beneath the need for approval, beneath the fear of rejection, beneath the endless thoughts. There is a version of you that doesn't need to perform, doesn't need to chase, doesn't need to prove, doesn't need to manipulate, doesn't need to be understood by everyone. That version doesn't become powerful by controlling other people. It becomes powerful by becoming difficult to control. And perhaps that's what deep thinking was trying to teach you all along. Not to see everything, but to see clearly. Not to know everyone, but to know yourself. Not to predict the future, but to prepare your character. Not to avoid pain, but to become capable of carrying it without losing yourself. Not to become cold, but to become steady. Not to win every battle, but to stop fighting battles that were never yours. They expected you to keep searching for answers. They thought every silence would pull you deeper. They thought every rejection would make you question yourself. They thought every uncertainty would control your attention. But you learned to pause. You learned to observe. You learned to question your own assumptions. You learned to let some questions remain unanswered. And eventually, you stopped needing to see what everyone else missed. Because you finally saw what mattered most. Your own mind, your own character, your own choices, your own life. And that's when everything changed. The world didn't become easier. You became harder to disturb. The people didn't become more predictable. You became less dependent on prediction. The future didn't become certain. You became more prepared for uncertainty. And your thoughts didn't disappear. You simply stopped allowing every thought to become your master. So the next time you notice something others don't rush to announce it. Observe, question, verify, and then ask the most important question. What is this asking me to become? Because that is the difference between intelligence and wisdom. Intelligence sees the pattern. Wisdom knows what to do with it. And the deepest thinker isn't the person who spends the most time inside their head. It's the person who can leave their head, return to reality, and deliberately choose who they will become. See deeply, think clearly, live deliberately, and remember, a mind that sees beneath the surface is powerful, but a mind that can govern what it sees is sovereign. If you want more psychological truths, Stoic principles, and lessons about mastering the mind instead of being mastered by it, subscribe to Sovereign Mindset. Because the goal was never to understand everyone. The goal was to become someone you no longer need to escape from.